Hello, this is Anna from ClearPix. Welcome to our first video blog. We are a consultancy specialized in business intelligence, big data, advanced analytics, and cloud. In this video, we'll show you how to lift and shift your integration services projects to Azure's cloud using Data Factory. So now let's go over the requirements that you'll need. First of all, of course, you'll need to have an Azure subscription. Within that subscription, you'll need to create a resource group. And within this resource group, you will need to create an Azure Data Factory version 2 service, as well as an Azure SQL database service. A basic tier is enough. Also, you'll need SQL Server Data Tools version 15.3 or later, as per basic integration services requirements, as well as a development environment. Visual Studio 2015 or later is recommended, and server, a database management studio, such as SQL Server Management Studio installed. Okay, these are the different steps. But first of all, we will look at the system as it is right now. We depart from the typical BI. We have 2 databases, and we have a project created, this one called Azure-SSIS Azure Lift, which basically what it does is it copies information from one database to the other database. So it's a very basic very basic set of activities, but it's just a typical, just a basic case of data management need. And if we take a look inside of these activities, we see that here we have the connections. These connect to the databases that we showed before, and this is just a simple T-SQL activity that just executes this code, which copies the information from one database to the other. As you see, the Destiny database is referenced within the code, something that you have to do in order to copy information from one database to the other. Would be the definition of an elastic query. Okay, the next step. Actually, the first step is going to be to create the Azure-SSIS integration runtimes. Here we are in the Microsoft Azure portal. We click on all resources to see all our resources, and then we go straight to Data Factory version 2 that I said before that we needed to create in order to do this exercise. Then we click on author and monitor, and once inside we go to the author, we click on the author tab, and within author we see we have different options to create the different objects. What we need here is to create an integration runtimes. No connections, not triggers, but an integration runtimes. You can see here that I already created, in preparation for this tutorial, I already created an integration runtime of integration services in Azure, but for the sake of this tutorial, we'll go over the steps of creating one. So you click on New, you click on Lift and Shift, SSIS Azure Runtime. You name it according to Azure's rules. You can, I name mine test. You can add a description if you want. Then an important step, you have to choose the location. It's recommended that the location of your integration runtimes is the same as the location of your SQL Server database instance. So you go over, mine is in West Europe, so I choose West Europe. And then I can modify, node size and node number. That lets me, in a very easy manner, to like increase the resources of my system, which is in the end what's going to execute, the tasks of my package. And in this case, I just need the minimum because it's a very simple copy activity. So yeah, I'll just leave that to 1, but you could just increase that up to 10, as you can see. And every increase that you apply or every change of resources, it's very clearly shown underneath, like the pricing that you are subject to and everything. Then I add my subscription. Those are the settings of my SQL database, the instance that I told you like you have to create prior to this exercise. As I told you before, the location is West Europe. Then I decide which database will host the catalog database. I just add my credentials and the tier that I need. I click on test connection, and once the connection is successful, I just have it ready to click on like create and create my integration and runtime. Okay, the next step is going to be to connect my integration services database in Azure. My Azure SQL database, I need to connect it to the Runtimes integration services database that I just assign it to through my runtime, my integration runtime. So I just I just connect to this database using Management Studio, as I always do. I connect to I choose the server name, authentication, and everything, like the server name that I put before in my integration runtime setup. And I use SQL Server authentication. And the important step now is that instead of just connecting, now I open the options and connect specifically to the database, to the integration services database. I connect, I click on connect, and now we'll see how I have here databases. I expand that, and you'll see how it appears here. My SQL Server Integration Services database. Here is where, when I'm connected to this database, I can go to the Integration Services catalog, and this is where I will load my packages, just like you do normally in your on-premise instance. But first of all, you need to create a folder to keep your projects. So the first time it will straightforwardly ask you to create a folder, because without a folder you cannot load any packages or do anything with it. So it's just very simple. You just need to choose a folder name and just go on and you just load your packages the same way as you do with your integration services. It works just the same. The next step is going to be adapting the cloud environment. This means that we need to do some changes on our new source and destination databases to adapt, having this copy activity happening on them. This is just, you can skip that part. This is just necessary because of the way I designed this lift and shift, which also includes like changing the environment from a totally on-premise environment to a cloud environment, which means I need to replicate the tables in the source database as well. But okay, let's go on and do that very quick. So basically, I just connect to my database. I might need to expand the options again because As you remember, I connected to my integration services catalog, and I cannot connect simultaneously to different databases. So I'll just click default here. That's because of the way Azure SQL database works. In this case, it's not like different databases in the same machine. It's like it works as if they were like completely different and separate machines all along. So I need to connect specifically to the one that I'm going to use, either integration services or database. In this case, we see that the catalog is not present because I'm connecting to the main database. So you see I have here my queries prepared. I'll basically execute them. I'm creating a master encryption password. Basically, I'm referencing the destination database so that when I do my elastic queries that I told you before, I don't really need to create two connections. I can just act as if the destination table was created in the same database. This is a cool adaptation that in the language that into SQL. When you apply it on SQL database, because of the way they are set up, in which they are like separated instances instead of being like different databases in the same server, like in SQL Server. Okay, just to show you like my source table, to be able to monitor it like easily, I created it in a way that it just has two columns, an ID column and a date stamp that is created every time I add another row to my table. This way I'll be able to track and monitor in the destination in the destination table if and when my rows have been copied and if they have been copied well and so on. Just as basic tracking information for the purpose of this POC. Done that, we need to do some adaptations in our integration services package as well. Do you remember like the code that I showed you before that my SQL queries that I was executing to copy the information from one database to the other? So basically, the changes that I have to do are, first, I need to create a connection manager that points to my new database on the cloud. But as you will see, it's straightforward, like it's just as if you were pointing to an on-premise SQL server. It works exactly the same way. It's really easy to do. If it's all Microsoft, obviously it works very smooth. Just as before, I choose my SQL Server authentication. I I write my username and password, and I'm set up. And also choose the database, my source database, and I'm done. Then I change, as I was telling you before, I have to change the code. I have to change first the connection of that activity, obviously. And then I have to change, I have here the reference to the, from the destination table to the, from the source table, to the destination table. Here I was moving the information, standing from the destination, I was pulling it from the source. Right now, as I have referenced the table as an object in my database, as I showed you before in the adaptations of the environment, I don't have to reference anything. The table is just as if it was created in my own database, in this case in my destination database. I click OK, and those are the only changes that it requires for my case, which is kind of specific, but it goes to show like that it's very, very similar. Like there are not many differences between having your environment on the cloud or on premise. If you go from SQL Server to Azure SQL database, that is to say, from Microsoft to Microsoft. Always remember that nuance. All right, so after that, it comes like the deployment of integration services, of your integration services package on Azure. As I told you before, there are not many differences between doing these on your Azure SQL database or your catalog in Azure SQL database from doing it on your catalog on your on-premise SQL Server. So you do as before, you connect, expanding the options and choosing your integration services database. And within your folder, the folder that you created before, you go on and right-click on projects or environments, and you just deploy your project or your environment, depending on what you want to upload. In this case, well, you have, as you know, you have to choose your integration services file from within development folder, and like the executable folder, and then you just go on and do the rest of the steps just as usual. And finally, well, I'm gonna cancel this one because I already deployed the project before and it's not gonna let me. But once you've done that, you just need to schedule this execution. To do so, you need to go back to the portal where we were before, and you will need to create a trigger for your for the execution. Whenever you want this to happen, you create a new trigger, just as a regular pipeline. You have different options: schedule, tumbling. Anyway, I'm not gonna entertain that. I'm not going to stay on that very long because this is not the point of the POC. But as you see, I just scheduled mine, and then you just click and finish, deploy it. Make sure you didn't have other changes and publish, because otherwise you just publish them. That's one of the perks of Data Factory, that you publish everything at once. Alright, so now I need to create a pipeline, because what I will schedule with the trigger is not actually the execution of the integration services package, but the pipeline that contains the activity that performs this execution. So I just name my pipeline Lift&Shift. Then I go to General and select my just drag and drop. It's just a drag and drop interface. I select my execute integration services package activity. I go to the general settings, name, etc. The important thing here is in the settings section, where I need to choose the integration runtime that I created before and that I'm going to use to execute my package. Right now it's it's deactivated. So because otherwise it's just spending money. So you need to be careful activating your runtime just when you need them. Then I just write my package path the way they were telling me to do, the name of the folder that I created before in Azure SQL database. If you remember, I created a folder named POC, then the name of the project and the name of the package that I want to execute. You have other options like login level and everything that need to match the setup that I did before. So you see the one that I've already created and that I'm going to execute. As I told you, you see the name of the folder, the name of the packet, of the project, and the name of the package. Then you can also add parameters and other properties that just add flexibility to the execution of your packages. But the important thing here, you see, you can create just choose the scope of the parameter, which I think is very interesting. You can either add a parameter that affects your whole project or just this specific package that you're going to execute in this activity, and you just name it and decide which value is going to have for your execution. Here you can add dynamic content, which means you can add properties of the different objects of your pipeline, for instance the date of execution and such. What's really powerful about deploying these packages on Azure Data Factory is that then you have all those activities available for execution, for like to set up just along your package. As you see here, I didn't go very creative. I just added a stored procedure activity, which basically is the one that creates the record just right before I copy them to another database. But you can choose from a wide set, from a wide range of activities. You can add web activities for reporting, for on-demand executions, Databricks for further transformations. Execute integration services package can be like the last activity from a series of big data transformations. You can actually experiment a lot. Then, as I said, to schedule this activity, you need to add a trigger to the pipeline. You just press an add trigger and add the trigger that you set up before, and then you just publish. I'm not gonna publish because this is a dumb example, but you just publish your changes, and if everything is all right, you have your package deployed and scheduled for execution when your trigger sort of triggers the execution, as its name indicates. Finally, what we're going to discuss are the monitor options, because of course there are some variations. Some may wonder, how now that I've deployed, will I encounter more difficulties monitoring its performance? How do I do so? That's what we're going to answer in the next section. After I've set up the trigger and everything, I go to the Monitor tab. That's the red button down here. And I see that after I've set the execution on of this pipeline, and it has succeeded, I can go here and see the different activities that have happened. I see that there are 2 activities, both succeeded, and here it shows me like which input and output each one of them has produced, the duration, the status, and the integration runtime that has run them. You can observe that our integration services activity has been dealt with by the integration runtime that we've set up. The other activity has been run by the integration, like the default integration runtime. So you can have different activities run by different integration runtimes, and that just goes to show you how flexible and powerful Data Factory is for the hybridization of different resources, all set up in by the same data integration tool. Another thing that I can do, because I created my tables so it could be easy to track the movement, the flow of data, is if you remember, I created my source table in a way that it had an ID and in a timestamp and a date stamp. So I can just go there and check, because if you remember, my pipeline was creating first the records and then moving them. So basically the date stamp is going to be the same one as the date stamp of my execution. So we'll check that. So as we can see, this is the execution that I just started a moment ago. And so that tells me that the copy activity has succeeded. Finally, if I connect as before to my database, to my integration services database, I can check, just as I do in my on-premise integration services database. I can check, you can check here the reports. So you just go to all messages, and it's going to show you the execution of your package and the different steps that happens along the way, execution and validation steps.